on your screen as I keep reminding you. Now, the questions we're considering tonight: how important is it to remember those that have made a positive contribution to the Ummah? And what sort of legacy would you like to leave when you, as we all will, kullu nafsin dhalikatul maut, we'll always taste death and we'll always leave this world whenever our time is destined. But what sort of legacy will we leave? And how will we like the world to remember it? And how important is it that employers support people with disabilities to progress their careers? Please share your thoughts now on 01924 231 083 or messages on WhatsApp, post on social media, and we'll read some of them on air throughout the program. Okay, let's get started on our first topic and guest. Dr. Robert Dixon Crane was the principal foreign policy advisor to the US President Richard Nixon. He held various roles in the State Department, in other parts of US government, federal government, including also to the ambassador to the United Arab Emirates appointed by former President Ronald Reagan. He's authored hundreds of books. He is the founder of the Washington-based foreign policy think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And it was during this time he began his journey into Islam. He became a Muslim in 1980 and would describe himself as an activist, and began writing several books, titles such as Planning the Future of Saudi Arabia, A Model for Achieving National Priorities, another one, The Grand Strategy of Justice, Kosovo and Chechnya, Products of the Past, Harbingers of the Future. The Role of Religion in America. Dr. Crane famously said about his journey to Islam, "In fact, God had directed me to Islam at the age 5 and then at 21 years old. But I did not know until I met the Bahraini man who told me that there were others who saw things shown to me too, and that I was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I've comprehended it at the age of 50. Shaykh Muhammad Umar is the chairman of the Ramadhan Foundation here in the UK. It works to build communities together. He was a close friend and ally of Dr. Crane, and he, I'm pleased to say, is joining us live from Manchester. Thank you so much, Shaykh Muhammad Umar, for honouring us and blessing us with your presence here on British Muslim TV, so that we can pay tribute to such a towering figure, not just in the Muslim community in America, but also somebody who made a massive contribution around the world. Tell us, how did you first come across Dr. Robert Dixon Crane?
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, Shafiq, Mohammed Shafiq, and the British Muslim TV for arranging this program in tribute to our late friend and mentor, Dr. Robert Farooq Dixon Crane, Farooq Abdul Haq, rahmatullah alayhi. My engagement with Dr. Crane is that I knew him from his writings and the things that he was doing, but I got to know him in towards the end of 2000 and towards the end of 2009, when we invited him to a conference in Malaysia with Dr. Mahathir Mohamad on the principal idealism of calling for Muslim unity, on the concept of al-maqasid al-sharia, and how the maqasid could be used as a framework to bring Muslims together. So Dr. Farooq, I engaged with him through my friend Muhammad Khan from the United States, and I got to know him one-to-one. We had many engagements prior, over the phone, telecommunications, prior to physically seeing him. So that is my initial, should we say, contact with Dr. Crane.
And when you look at his early life, where he is the senior policy advisor, foreign policy advisor to President Richard Nixon, who was a powerful president until he was till he abdicated. Tell us about that period. What did he learn from his early part of that life?
Well, Dr. Crane shared a lot of stories with me, and he expanded in very great detail regarding his role in the White House. And one of the things that he did was he actually told me that with President Nixon, there were two types of people or two types of personality that you saw in President Nixon. One was a person who was extremely learned, extremely caring for people, and then there was another type of Nixon who would do anything just to achieve his objectives. And Dr. Crane, what he told me was during that period of his engagement and advising President Nixon, he would monthly put together a report, a journal of different articles specifically on Islam and Muslims engagement within the Middle East for President Nixon. And what he told President Nixon at that time, that in order to defeat communism and to deal with that tribulation, we should engage with Muslims and we should engage with Islam. Islam had an answer in regards to that. So Dr. Crane basically, immensely, he wrote on many different subjects. His specific area of expertise was what we call international law. He called it compassionate justice, ultimate compassionate justice, and he believed that you can only deal, the United States could only become successful if its foreign policy was based upon compassionate justice. Unfortunately, what we did see with him was he formulated foreign policy, but when he was appointed at a more senior role, Henry Kissinger, the notorious Henry Kissinger, got him fired. Now, if he wasn't fired, we would have seen a different total engagement of how the Middle East eventually evolved. Because one of the things Dr. Crane was adamant about, which President Reagan gave him this duty, was to begin a two-way engagement with the British, with the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood movement in the Middle East. Dr. Crane identified that you couldn't deal, by just banning people. You had to have an engagement. So the U.S. foreign policy at that time was to back channel and have some type of engagement with the British, with the Muslim Brotherhood. So he did that, but unfortunately he was fired because he was too radical, should we say. And he called for, and he was an ardent supporter of the Palestinian cause. And what he said, and this was before he became a Muslim, he himself said that he was a Muslim all his life naturally. He never engaged in idolatry, should we say, or engaged in what people call shirk. He was a person who was in the fitrah, the natural disposition of a man, someone who followed God. And he said at that time, he was very adamant to the various presidents that in order to deal with the Muslim world, you have to have compassionate justice for the Palestinians. And that was probably one of the reasons why he was kicked, why he was fired from the White House.
And you get to see how the world operates when you're at the heart of government in Washington and you're a senior foreign policy advisor. Do you think that helped define who he was as a human being, as an activist, not as a Muslim, but just as an activist, and the work that he went on to do when he left government?
I wouldn't say that, because I would say Dr. Crane, in his entire life, especially this is what his father said. His father was a professor at Harvard University, and Dr. Crane was the first American to study in Eastern Germany, occupied by the Nazis. And the reason he actually went there was that his father said, in order to know and in order to be able to deal with the problems of the earth, you have to sit with your enemies and know what they stand for. So Dr. Crane spent over a year in East Germany. He graduated from them, but he always had this, maybe this was a gift from Allah to him, this compassionate behavior, the core element which designed or which was used that he used to evolve himself or evolve as a human being, that was fundamental, that was the benchmark, was always this idea of compassionate justice, which the Quran talks about, which he says ultimately is the maqasid of the Sharia, the ultimate purpose of what the Sharia stands for. And he had these characteristics, these things. So when he went into an arena which is like politics, which is, politics is a shady business, especially in those days, he was saying, that did not actually corrupt him. What he was focused on was engaging to change society and to develop it.
Yeah, in a really just going to say in a real positive way. We're just coming to our first break. Shaykh Muhammad Umar is our special guest, chairman of the Ramadhan Foundation, remembering Ambassador Robert Dixon Kane. who was an extraordinary human being. And I hope over the next hour or so we'll be able to give you a taste of what type of person he was and the difference he made and the legacy that he has left, not just for Muslims in America, but for Muslims around the world. And that will live on in the books that he's written. We're going to take a very quick break. I know that Shaykh Umar is going to be staying with us for the first hour. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Don't go anywhere. We'll be with you shortly. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, live from our studios here in Wakefield. We're taking your calls on 01924231083. You can get in touch with us on our social media handles, British Muslim TV. We'll have an exclusive conversation with the Honourable Shaykh Muhammad Umar, Chairman of the Ramadhan Foundation, remembering Ambassador Dr. Robert Dixon Crane. He's joining us live from Manchester. Shaykh Muhammad Umar, before the break we heard about Dr. Crane's time at the White House. How would you reflect the impact he had on President Nixon, President Reagan, and the US foreign policy community?
Well, one of the responsibilities of Dr. Crane was that he was instrumental, should we say, in the election campaign of President Reagan being elected as US president. So Dr. Crane was not only his advisor prior to President Nixon Crane becoming president. He was his advisor when he was, when he was in different capacities, and then Dr. Crane actually became involved with the campaign. He had a senior role. He was his advisor. He prepared his speeches. He wrote 15 articles in which Gerald Ford, who then became the eventual president of the US, wrote an introduction to, which I really hope someone can. It's in his library, and I hope we can get hold of that and actually publish it, because what that demonstrates when you read, and this is something I've done. I've actually read many of his articles that he wrote while he was an advisor and while he was active in Washington. His writing is phenomenal. It's really phenomenal because he's setting the foundation about how to really engage and how to change the world, how to make the world a better place. So he was phenomenal. So his engagement, is from 1967 onwards, or even before that. He was one of the most instrumental people at that time in engaging many different people. He reached the peak of his career. I mean, he held positions that people would dream of. People would actually dream of, having such elite positions.
I was just going to say the role of senior foreign policy advisor is now what's increasingly called the national security advisor in modern White House roles. It's a very important role within government. What did you make of his contribution to increasing the dialogue between the West and East?
Well, he was an ardent supporter of dialogue, of having positive dialogue, but and having people sit with each other and share their views on many issues. And Dr. Crane said that one of the reasons that he had that idealism of engagement and having people speak to each other, that emerged from his upbringing. He was born in a family of very educated, intellectuals, not just a family of a hierarchy family, an influential family. Even though his first cousin, was a U.S. congressman for over 40 years or 30 years. Even his brother was one of the senior advisors to recently President Trump's, when he was in the White House. So Dr. Crane came from a family of people who were highly intellectual, but were engaging, tolerant, and understood this concept. And he himself, even though I've used the word tolerant, he was very anti-using this word. He never used to like, and this is an engagement I had with him once. He said, I don't like the term tolerant, because tolerant basically means I'll tolerate you today, but I'm going to kill you tomorrow. And he was a guy that pushed forward this notion that it needs to be a pluralistic understanding of our differences. And that is that is the reason why he engaged. So he was saying to the Americans, don't be arrogant with that you are a superpower, because this is the way America was portraying itself in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. He said, even though you have this, advancement of being a superpower, there are other societies and other communities which you can mutually benefit from. So he was a phenomenal individual in that field. So he was really a Muslim from day one, and his engagement, his work, always demonstrated that. And if you look at his life, now if you reflect upon it, it's extraordinary that a person was so protected, should we say? We would say divinely protected by Allah. That he was divinely protected. He was able to demonstrate himself. He was an advisor to the Bahraini government on economic advice, to the Bahraini king, the late king, and he advised them on economic reform. He wrote a major treatise on Saudi Arabia, its foreign policy, engagement in the Muslim world, unbelievable stuff. Now the White House is different, because in 2022 you have Muslims that are part of politics and so forth. But he was engaging, and he was talking about Islam when there was absolutely no one in the White House. America had a very at that time was the civil rights issues between the Afro-Americans, the discrimination against the African American people. So he was phenomenal, and he was someone that actually called for that to be ended. But alhamdulillah, a really phenomenal man.
And some would argue that he made such a positive contribution that it helped define President Nixon's and Reagan's relationship with the Middle East. Is that a strong reflection?
I would say yes. Let me share something with you that he told me, and obviously he's passed away, so I can share it, because he said don't share it when he was alive. He said he was very close to Donald Rumsfeld, the notorious, defense secretary who took us into Iraq, this disastrous war. Over millions of people were displaced and killed. So I asked him, I said, Dr. Crane, tell me, what was Donald like, when you knew him? And he said that when he met him originally, he was a very genuine, good person. And then after about 40, 50 years later, Dr. Crane met him again. And he said that I could only see darkness in his face. At that time, Dr. Crane wasn't a Muslim. He said the only thing that emanated from his face was pure darkness. And so he was engaging. He was a person that he actually told, and he used to advise President Nixon and different individuals that you can't ban the Muslim Brotherhood. This idealism that's banning people doesn't do anything. You have to engage with them. And we've learned now in political science now, i.e., for example, with the Taliban, it was a terrorist, whatever organization, but they're in power now in Afghanistan, and the EU and America and all countries are engaging with the Taliban to make a change. So Dr. Crane was talking about that type of engagement, I would say 60 years ago.
Yeah, well, we're going to reflect more on this, Shaykh Muhammad Umar. I know you're going to stay with us for the next 30 minutes or so. We're really grateful and honoured that you've given in so much of your time to remember an extraordinary human being, somebody who's made a real positive contribution. And often it is being said that you don't realise that if you live in the time of such great people, the powerful impact they have on the Ummah until they leave. So to know that you live in the time in which such giant scholars live, societies don't realise until that person is gone, that personality is gone, about the positive impact they make. We're remembering Ambassador Robert Crane here exclusively on British Muslim TV. We'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Shaykh Muhammad Umar. Join us on the other side of these messages. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, live from our studios here in Wakefield. Now, we're taking your calls on 01924231083, so the lines are open. You can get in touch with us also on social media. The handle is British Muslim TV. We've got an exclusive conversation with the Honourable Shaykh Muhammad Umar, Chairman of the Ramadan Foundation, remembering Ambassador Robert Dixon Crane. He was a senior advisor to various US presidents. He was an ambassador. He was a Muslim scholar. He was an influencer. He was a great thinker who sadly passed away in December last year. And we wanted to take the opportunity here on British Muslim TV to remember him, to reflect about him and his contribution. Shaykh Muhammad Umar is joining us live from Manchester in the UK. Now, Shaykh Muhammad Umar, he made a huge impact in understanding between different faiths as well. Interfaith was very important to his identity and the work that he did. Tell us about his record when it came to interfaith.
So, Dr. Crane, not only was he a genius, I call him an intellectual powerhouse, a giant personality. He was a great thinker, a philosopher. He has studied philosophical studies and philosophy generally. I mean, he was a master of Aristotle and Plato's frameworks and theories, and he was someone who was able to relate to them and add more information to it. He was a master in so many fields, writing and so forth. But one of the things that he was an ardent supporter of was he called it not tolerant, but having cooperation of understanding between Muslims and other religions. And he called this a pluralistic dialogue between people based upon compassionate justice. And he said that in order for us to survive as a Muslim ummah, and in order for the Quran to be relevant in all times and all places, which the Quran does, and one of the miracles of the Quran is that it is relevant in all times and places, is that we have to be able to contextualize it in a holistic manner with other religions and look at what we have in common. So Crane said his theory was that all religions have an ultimate truth. All religions have what we call an ultimate truth. Some call it divine truth. He wasn't a perennialist. So perennialism is basically believing that all religions are truthful. All the religions on the earth are on the path of truthfulness, and whatever religion you follow, it is fine. He wasn't a perennialist at all, but he believed to the extent that all religions did have what we call divine, he called it compassionate elements and some type of ultimate truth in it. And he said that ultimate truth, according to Dr. Crane about interfaith dialogue, he said the foundational area of what tools and equipment can we use to engage with the religions. His theory was the maqasid of the Sharia, which is what we call the ultimate purpose of the Sharia, why the Sharia came, why Islam came. He said that was the premises of bringing us together. And he said that maqasid, the five fundamental elements in our Sharia, he says that wasn't limited to Muslims, but is actually found in all religions. And he said that should be the beginning or the initial phase of engaging with each other. Really phenomenal stuff. His stuff was really out of this world. What he basically did was he took Ghazali's idea, Ghazali's theory of Maqasid Sharia, because the Maqasid was something which Al-Juwayni, Imam al-Haramain, explained in some detail, limited. Al-Ghazali takes it further, Shatibi explained it in great detail, but Crane took it and he basically put a new twist to it, and he made it more relevant to a common world today. And that was phenomenal the way he did that. And unfortunately, one thing that I wanted to do with him, because I wrote on the Maqasid and he helped me on that, was for him to deliver a online course recording on that. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. But yeah, he was phenomenal in his approach and his ways.
And how do you think he was celebrated and recognized amongst the American Muslim community?
I found it quite upsetting that, unfortunately, the problem we have is in the modern world that we live in today, it's all about celebrityism. It's all about who has the most ticks on social media, who has the most followers on social media. Dr. Crane was someone who Robert Spencer was an individual who wrote a book on the Prophet about jihad, and he said that the notion of terrorism that we are fighting in the Muslim world, he said this isn't something new. He said Islam has always been a terrorist religion. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a terrorist. All of this Al-Qaeda, ISIS, violent ideology is intrinsically part of Islam. And that was something Dr. Crane rebutted in his book with Dr. Muhammad Khan, Dr. Muhammad Khan from the US. Both Dr. Khan and Dr. Crane co-authored the book on Islam in replying after September 11th. And that was a reply to Robert Spencer's book about how he portrayed Muslims and Islam. And when you read it, it's phenomenal how Dr. Crane, unfortunately, I really believe that the Muslims did not take advantage of him, did not appreciate what an intellectual giant he was. He was phenomenal. His knowledge was out of this world. Really, he was someone who came out with, you know, I was discussing an idealism and we were trying to find out who originated this concept of al-maqasid sharia. And I took it back to at-Tirmidhi, al-Azam at-Tirmidhi, one of the early scholars, not Tirmidhi, the hadith scholar. This was the philosopher. And he came back and said to me, no, that maqasid, the originator of it was Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, the Imam from the Ahlul Bayt. And that was just, it was phenomenal how he was able to research and come to a conclusion. I really feel that the Muslims really, you know, in America especially, I'm not generalizing, but I don't know, I was very upset on how they responded in remembering what type of genius he was after all the hard work that he did. And Shafiq, he was a man that if you went to him, Dr. Crane wasn't a manager. He wasn't a person that managed things. He was a guy that if 10 people went to him and said, do this, he would do it with you 100%. And he would do it without expecting anything in return. So he wouldn't do it for any money. Wallahi. I did many. I'll share one example.
Please do.
I went to Iraq in 2016 and I wrote a very detailed report on Iraq on our visit as imams. And I didn't have finance to get someone to proofread it. And I joked to Dr. Crane. And Dr. Crane said, I'll do it for you. And he proofread it all. He organized it. He corrected the whole academic writing, whatever. And his level wasn't, he's not someone that proofreads small reports. He produces foreign policy. But that is how humble he was. He wasn't arrogant. He was a simple guy. If you phoned him, he would help you. He wouldn't say, call my secretary. That is the type of individual. He was a divine wali of Allah, I would say. Definitely.
And in the aftermath, you mentioned 9/11, but in the aftermath of 9/11, he provided that very important leadership to the Muslim world. How do you reflect on his contribution, not just Robert Spencer, but certainly many others in bridging the divide between Muslims and the wider world?
Crane put forth relevant frame. He was a pragmatic individual. He wasn't just a person that spoke nicely and said, you know, this is what Islam meant. He was someone that was able to take the concepts of the Quran, the idealism of compassionate justice, which the Quran talks about, and he was able to explain it and contextualize it in a modern way. So when you read his writings, so he's co-authoring, or he was managing a book which Sister Samira, she's a historian from France, she's putting together about Muslim engagement and Muslim evolvement or evolving out of America prior to Christopher Columbus. So Crane was putting together evidences and both of them were looking at historical accounts how Muslims were in America well before Christopher Columbus actually went there. So that was one project. He was involved with so many different things. Maqasid was the fundamental thing that he put forth, and he was an ardent supporter of this concept, because to be honest, this is a framework that we can use to bring people together. It's a benchmark, it's a foundational framework that can be used to bring people together, and inshallah we hope we can revive. We're trying to put a website together where we can put all of his online stuff together, republish his work, make it free, available freely. But unfortunately, like any great human being, we only appreciate them when we don't have them,
Yeah.
when they're not amongst us, when they're not here to give us that advice. And I really believe that the Muslim Ummah, we really failed as an Ummah to take so much benefit from such a giant personality. So if I was to say to you that amongst the modern world today, especially post Enlightenment period, intellectual theory and thought, who was the most influential and the most critical and the most learned, I would say Dr. Crane is definitely amongst the top 5, without a doubt.
Yeah. And he even appeared on the list of the world's most influential Muslims just recently in 2020. And that he, whilst you talked about the American aspect where he wasn't maybe as recognized or celebrated as much, but actually around the world, particularly in the Middle East, he was somebody who was well recognized and respected.
Yeah, the Muslims in the world were just astonished how a white man, such an educated, such a genius like him, such an intellect, unbelievable. He was earning 6-figure sums. That was his salaries. He was a man. His father was a professor of law. His great-grandfather was a professor at Harvard. He came from an intellectual family. And irrespective of all of that, Muslims were so astonished how a man of such a caliber, how he became a Muslim and then used his experience to enrich Islam and the Muslims. And it's phenomenal. I call Dr. Crane a person, he lived his life like Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, radiallahu anhu, the Sahabi, a man who detached himself away from the luxuries of the world. This was a man that had first-hand contact with heads of states, with Arab leaders. He, on the night of September, on the night of the Iraq War, when Iraq was attacked, he was actually with one of the most senior Saudi princes, who I don't want to mention his name, because Dr. Crane said not to mention it. So, but the point was he had so much influence amongst so many powerful people, but he never took advantage of that. He never used it for his own selfish needs. Not a single penny, nothing at all. Whatever money he was given, he gave it. He distributed to many organizations in America, and he was phenomenal. Sheikh, in fact, he was so influential. Like you said, the Muslim world appreciated him. Like Sheikh Moza of the Qatar Foundation, the mother of Sheikh Thani, the ruler of Qatar, she was the one that read about Dr. Crane, and she was the one that was adamant that Dr. Crane should become a director in 2010 of a new center studying about Islam and the modern societies and organizations. So that's the type of person we're referring to.
We're just coming to our next break, and I just wanted to talk, just for our viewers' sake, about how do you assess his role as an Islamic scholar? Because he was an authoritative voice as an Islamic scholar as well.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. So Dr. Crane, in the 90s, he went to Syria, and he was a guest at the house of the late Mufti Shaykh Ahmad Kuftaru, rahmatullah alayh. And Ahmad Kuftaru, for those who aren't aware, everyone does interfaith today. Shaykh Ahmad Kuftaru is what I call the pioneer. He's the one that founded real international interfaith dialogue. And he spent over 12 months in his house reading his writings. Dr. Arafat Bashir from America was instrumental in that. He was a phenomenal scholar. So if I was to say, Shafiq, that Dr. Crane was a Ghazali of today, like Imam al-Ghazali, when we read about him, not as a faqih, but as a philosopher, as a thinker, as someone who influences people, I would definitely say Dr. Crane is of that level. Wow. He was able to take Western criticism, and he was able to take the arguments that the Enlightenment period put forth to Islam, and he was able to answer it and able to rebuttal the arguments at that intellectual level. And we don't have anyone like we have Sayyid Nasr, from the US. Yeah. We have Naqib al-Attas in Morocco, certainly in Malaysia, a phenomenal scholar. These are all great scholars who, sorry, I think you got a break?
No, I'm just going to ask you one quick question before we got a couple of minutes before our next break. Do you think that as the Muslim Ummah, we will understand his importance and his contribution, or will it take future historians looking back at his life to really appreciate the impact he made?
That's a really pertinent question you've asked. I honestly believe that Muslims will not be able to grasp the intellectual geniusness of Dr. Crane, and I believe that it's going to take historians, it's going to take people like myself, in my humble role with Dr. Safi and Kaskas, with the friends of Dr. Crane, the students of Dr. Crane, his son John Crane. We need to bring his work together and reproduce it and make that readily available to the future Muslims. And I think, inshallah, once he will be someone that we will be studying in the future, people will be writing more about him, his theories and so forth. He was phenomenal, but an amazing individual. His ability to analyze things is amazing. I studied the Shatibi's concept of al-Maqasid al-Sharia in detail, but I was never able to contextualize it or understand it. I wrote about the Maqasid. My article on Maqasid, my paper on the Maqasid was heavily influenced by Dr. Crane. And he was someone who I could just pick up the phone and I could say, Doctor, I want to discuss this mas'ala with you. I want to discuss this issue with you. And there was no arrogancy. There was no like, oh, call me back. You need to go to my secretary.
Yeah, he was always available. I'm sorry, I'm interjecting there. We just need to go to our next break, and then inshallah we'll continue and try to bring the conversation, remembering Ambassador Robert Crane, who sadly passed away in December in Virginia in the United States. We hope we're learning much about this extraordinary human being. Join us at the side of these important messages. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, live from our studios in Wakefield. We're taking your calls on 01924 231 083. You can get in touch with us on our social media handles on British Muslim TV. We've got an exclusive conversation with the Honourable Shaykh Muhammad Umar, Chairman of the Ramadhan Foundation, reflecting, remembering, celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Robert Dixon Crane. He was born in 1929. He was, as I said, a senior foreign policy advisor to Richard Nixon. He was appointed by President Ronald Reagan as the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. He served in Bahrain. He served in many think tanks and was an extraordinary human being who became a Muslim, had a really powerful story and a real sense, an intellectual of the highest caliber. And he sadly died in December last year. And we wanted to remember him and think about learning about these people. And I tried to reflect on this. I had the distinct honor of meeting him a few times over the years in various parts of the world. He was an extraordinary, humble person. Shaykh Muhammad Umar, you spent lots of time with him away from the glare of the public, because often people have a public persona which is different from their private persona. What was Dr. Crane like in private, and what did he do to relax?
So Dr. Crane, in his private life, he was a very genuine individual, very calm, very soft-spoken, very humble, very. He was a great active listener. He listened a lot to people, you know, and he would listen and he would engage with you. He would never want to have the main seat, or he would never want to be the focal of attention in any gathering, private or public. You know, his characteristics. He never spoke ill of anyone. I've never heard him speaking ill of anyone at all, even the people that disagreed with him. He always spoke positively. He always spoke about, you know, in a good manner. You know, a phenomenal individual. Even, for example, when me and Dr. Crane, we were together, we had a private meeting with the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tun Abdullah Badawi. And this was after a dinner we had with, it was a big dinner, many hundreds of people were there. And then Tun Badawi said he wanted to sit with us privately and discuss. And we spent like 2.5 hours with Tun Badawi discussing many issues, Maqasid al-Sharia, Islam al-Hadari, you know, Islamic finance and so forth. And Dr. Crane was so humble. He was so, you know, he was very relaxed, even though he was a person who just his CV demanded that the main chair belonged to him. His CV demands that his expertise, his experience demanded all of that, but he was so humble. He was a man that he never said, I wanted this, I want that. He was so relaxed. And again, anyone that went to him, and even I know a lot of people that went to him and took advantage of him for their own purpose of, I don't know, publishing something or writing something. And Dr. Crane, even though he knew that the person was doing it for his own benefit, he was still helping. That is the type of person he was. He wasn't someone who wouldn't help people. He would help. He would absolutely help anyone.
Yeah. And as I said, you were friends with him for a number of years. Any notable moments together that stand out for you?
Sorry, what was that?
You were friends for many years. Is there any notable thing, those private moments that you had, that kind of give you an indication that this was an extraordinary human being?
The most amazing thing about him was how respectful he was to not people. We weren't even his peers. We were, maybe we weren't even, capable of being his students and his people who would listen to him. But even after all of that, he was extremely humble. He would always refer to us with nice titles, even though we never deserved them. He gave us credit. He was very kind enough to write an introduction to a paper that I wrote on jihad. So I was exploring how jihad had the word jihad had evolved and changed from a classical period to a modern period, how it's been abused. And he wrote a beautiful introduction to that. He wrote an introduction to my Iraq report. He wrote a number of articles. In fact, I wrote an article on President Obama's second term of coming into his presidency, and Dr. Crane wrote another one, and he used my article. That is how he was. He was a phenomenal man, very, very unique, a beautiful individual, humble, had a great characteristics, a very funny individual, and he was a very down to earth person. Anyone could get on with him, and he, subhanallah, may Allah give him the highest station in Jannah, inshallah.
I remember, I don't know if you remember this, when we were in Malaysia and we went out and we got a KFC and he went with us. Do you remember?
Yes, yes.
And it was just amazing in the sense that this extraordinary human being was there with us, and he would never let you feel as if you weren't worthy of being sitting. As you said, this is a man who sat with presidents and royal members of royal families around the world, but he didn't treat you any differently.
Yeah, I can remember one specific incident. I was online with him, and I wanted to do a test run on the line because he was doing an online conference with us. And anyway, he never knew how to work computers at all. He was a disaster with that. And this is how unique. A carer came into his house, and she was caring for his wife. And anyway, the carer, I spoke to the carer and said, "Could you help?" She then started helping Dr. Crane, changing the settings and doing different things. She went beyond her role of what support she provided. Anyway, we got the connection with the video via Zoom. And before she went, what Dr. Crane did, he took out of his wallet and he took some money. I don't know how much money he took out, and he gave her that as a gift. He said, "Take this, please, from me." And she said, "I don't need it." He said, "No, please take it from me. It's a gift from me to you because you went your extra mile just to provide the service or provide this help." And that is the type of person he was. He would recognize people and he would support people. Anyone that worked with him, anyone that worked under him, like Sister Nancy, Sister Hadi, from different places, they will all be testament to this point that he was very humble, and he had a heart of a gold, a phenomenal individual. Even though I met scholars who were so learned like him, but you can't relate to them, you can't engage with them because they're on a different level. They don't understand things maybe. But Dr. Crane was totally opposite. He had all of that knowledge, but he was able to engage with anyone, and he came to anyone's level, and there was no arrogancy at all in.
Yeah. Are you still there, sir? Okay. We'll try and sort that out, and we'll bring you back. But Are you still there? Okay. We'll try to sort that out whilst we're waiting. We're just reflecting on the extraordinary life of Ambassador Robert Dixon Crane. And often, I suppose in reflection, as I said earlier on, you live at a time of extraordinary human beings. You would probably think about a person who makes a contribution, not just to Islam and the Ummah, but to the wider community, and that you live within their time. So you look at the times like Abdullah Quilliam, the early part of the 20th century, and you look at certain scholars, Ghazali, we talked about Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam, and other Islamic scholars who would have made a unique contribution to the Ummah. And they were towering figures, but there are also others. Many of you watching this at home will know about people who made such a huge contribution to the life of the Ummah in every small way, in their own unique contribution, and in their unique way. And in a sense, we don't get the opportunity to reflect, to celebrate, to commemorate, and to pay tribute to some of those people. Dr. Crane and his generation, and the generations of our forefathers, my father's generation, your grandparents' generation, the people who came here in the UK in particular to the 50s and the 60s, who made a unique contribution when there was no Muslim community here in the United Kingdom. Just reflecting in the United States about his contribution in the political arena, in government and in diplomacy. But actually, he was part of a generation where there was no halal meat, there was no mosque, there was no Islamic education, there was no businesses. The sense, often if you talk to that generation, they will remind you that the month of Ramadan would come and go, and they wouldn't know about the sense that they'd missed the month of Ramadan. They'd get a letter from India, Pakistan, and places like that, the blue letter, if you remember, airmail, that would tell them that they've done that. Or a cassette would be recorded by their loved ones. I know my mum has cassettes recorded of her mum, my late grandma. And so the point I'm trying to make here is we should appreciate the beautiful people that live amongst us, who are extraordinary human beings, who are making such a beautiful difference, positive life. I just want to say, I think we're having some connection issues. The weather is quite bad here in the UK, apparently. Lots of rain. I suppose Shaykh Umar was in Manchester, so I could hear the sound of the rain, and that's what the forecast is, so please do keep safe. But I want to say thank you to him, and thank you for giving us the opportunity here at British Muslim TV to celebrate such an extraordinary human being. And as I said, we will probably not really appreciate his intellectual strength, his contribution, and the massive work that he's done in terms of writing books and the impact he's made around the world in our generation. It will be future historians that will look back at that period and look back at his extraordinary life and make a difference. And to him, his family, his friends, his colleagues around the world who weren't able to gather because of the pandemic to pay tribute to him, to join the funeral in Virginia in the United States, we offer our condolences and we pay tribute to him. And I suppose that's the best that we can do from the United Kingdom. So we thank Shaykh Muhammad Umar, and we thank, we send our love to his family and his friends and colleagues around the world. Thank you so much, Shaykh Muhammad Umar, the chairman of the Ramadhan Foundation. When we come back, we have an extraordinary story with Haleemah Sadiaa, the blind law champion, is going to be joining us, telling us about her extraordinary story. We'll take a very quick break. We'll be back very shortly. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusive here on British Muslim TV, live from our studios here in Wakefield. We thank you and we hope that we did justice to the memory of Ambassador Robert Dixon Crane just before the break. And once again, thank you so much to Shaykh Muhammad Umar for being so kind with all that time. Now, we're taking your calls on 01924231083. You can get in touch with us on our social media handle, British Muslim TV. Let's move on to our final story and guest. Now, breaking down barriers in a chosen career is what often drives many others. But when you have a disability and are partially blind, the obstacles, the challenges are somewhat different. But this has never stopped my next guest. When she posted a professional image on Twitter with her white cane, the tweet went viral with over 30,000 likes. Haleemah Sadiaa lives in Slough and is on a journey to crack glass ceilings. And I'm really pleased that we can have this conversation about her career and her future. Haleemah Sadiaa joins us live from Slough for this exclusive conversation on British Muslim TV. Haleemah Sadiaa, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to British Muslim TV.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Honestly, I was really pleased that, you know, someone from British Muslim TV, a channel that I've grown up watching, you know, reached out and was in my DMs. So I was like, oh my goodness.
That's good to hear. Now tell us, let's start at the beginning. What was it like growing up for you?
What was it like growing up? Well, growing up for me was a bit different to other people, because obviously I have my added challenges of being visually impaired. So my journey is still, you know, one day is not the same. I'm still learning things about myself every day, and things that work today won't work tomorrow. So yeah, it's all a sort of up in the air. But to sort of talk you through how much sight I have, I do a little demonstration where I ask people to cover their right eye completely and then cover their left eye, but leave a little bit of a gap between the two middle fingers.
Yeah. I'm just doing it now.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it now. I don't know if you can see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how much sight I think I have, but I probably have less than that.
Even less than that?
Probably, yeah. Wow. Because obviously when you're looking through the gap, you still have your full sight. You know, you can still probably see everything you can. You've just got a bit of an obstruction. But my eyesight, I can't. I think I probably still have less than that. Like doctors, they explained it. They explained it as if you take an eye and cut it into 4, I have less than 1/4 eyesight in my left eye. And my left eye is my strongest eye, so you can only imagine how much I can see from my right, which isn't much. So I'm functionally blind in my right eye, and my left eye is my main eye. But my eyesight wasn't actually picked up until I was about 3 years old. And the story that actually came about is quite a nice story. My mum really likes it because obviously my Nana Abu, my mum's dad, he was involved. And what had happened was we were living in Pakistan at the time, and I'd dropped my lunch money on the floor. And as we all know, places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, they have really, really traditional marble, colourful flooring. And so I couldn't find my lunch money, and my Nana Abu, he was just watching me, and he was like, why can't she see it? It's right in front of her. And so I was sort of feeling around for it with my hand. And then he, you know, he's the one that sort of noticed it, and then took me to we were living in Karachi at the time. So my mum's family's from Karachi, and then he took me to the hospital in Karachi, and parents did tests, and yeah, it was found out that I have a visual impairment, and so I should, you know, come back to England. But it's not genetic, so you know, they don't really know what has caused my eyesight and whether there's a cure. So I'm a bit of a medical marvel, and I also have that thing looming over me that I could lose my sight one day completely. So yeah, it's a bit about my childhood.
That's great to hear that story. But tell us, where did the interest in law come from?
The interest in law, as you can probably tell, Mohammed, is I quite like to talk.
I love listening to you.
Thank you. I like public speaking, and you know, as you may be aware, there's two types of lawyers in the UK. There's solicitors and barristers, and solicitors are the ones that do all the the more important work. I need to be careful.
We just should be very careful.
I've got a friend who's taken the solicitor route, and he's actually tuned in. So you know, but so solicitors would sort of prepare the case file and meet with the client and do all the paperwork behind it, but then they would pass the case file to the barrister, who would then go into court, stand up in front of court, and address the judge and the jury. And so I quite like the advocacy side of things and the public speaking side of things, and I think it probably comes a bit easier because I can't make eye contact, and that's probably a good thing because I don't get too scared, you know, knowing that people are looking at me. So yeah, I guess it's a blessing in disguise, but I do enjoy public speaking, and which is why I was really, you know, happy to do this interview, because I love to talk.
We're absolutely fascinating conversation, and we're absolutely loving listening to you. I'm pretty similar to you. I like talking, so it's always great when you can just zip it and listen to somebody else's powerful story. Now you've got a disability, as you know, being partially blind. Tell us a bit about how does that impact on everyday life for somebody like me who doesn't have a visible disability as such, and viewers, what life is like in terms of everyday.
Of course. So it's funny that you say that, because my disability, if I don't have my white cane, would be invisible. And the whole reason that I've actually started using my white cane is so that I don't have those awkward questions when I ask someone, you know, where's the closest bank, is that they don't sort of say that way. So now that I hold my white cane, and if I was to ask them where's the closest bank, they would say, go past this shop, take a left. They're a bit more detailed. And I used to find it a lot when I was sort of in my teenage years, that I was struggling with, I was always quite confident with my disability. You know, I sort of realized that it's not going anywhere. It's not, it's sort of here to stay. So let me try live my life as best as I can. And with that came the acceptance and the confidence that, okay, let's now ask for help. And so when when I was a teenager, I was sort of in the middle where I wasn't quite sure how I do that, because every time I would ask someone something, it would always come down to me having to tell them, the reason why I'm asking is because I'm visually impaired. And then to just avoid having that conversation, I've just started using my cane. And it's only been about 4 years that I think I've used my cane full time, and I absolutely love it. I think it's empowered me so much. I even now go out at night, which I didn't used to do before because I was so hesitant. I obviously still use whoever I'm with. I still use their arm. You know, I'm still holding their arm, but having my cane has really, you know, empowered me, which is why I, you know, thought it was right to have it in my picture, my professional call to the bar picture. Like literally, that was the only reason, because I come from I have quite a few attributes, and by looking at the picture, you can see them all. Like you can see that I'm Pakistani, you can see I'm a female, you can see that I'm a hijabi, and having my cane in the picture also shows that I have a disability. So it meant a lot to me for, you know, having that. And I've got the picture. I literally put the picture up today, so it's on my left, and it's just nice to look at as well, because it's a bit of motivation for you. And then in my family picture, I used the fake degree, but in my individual picture, I made sure that I had my cane in it, because it means more to me, and it's my picture, so you know, I can do what I want.
Absolutely, you can do whatever you like. Now, the white cane that you're talking about has been an important tool for you, but you haven't always been comfortable in using a cane, have you?
No, I haven't. I see, this is the thing I say now, is I only wished I used it sooner. So maybe when I was in secondary school, because it really would have saved me a lot of trauma. I've only started using it recently, and that's obviously after the whole acceptance part of it, because I just went, it's more practical that I use it. But before that, I didn't like using it because you don't really see many you don't really see many blind people looking like me, if that makes sense. There's not much.
Especially hijabi wearing.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really see a blind hijabi with a white cane walking around, do you? It's just not seen. And so, but also there's a massive, cultural side of things as well, is that disability isn't spoken about in South Asian communities. It's sort of seen as a burden, it's seen as a negative, and I think that sort of played some things. I mean, my family are absolutely beautiful. My mum and my siblings have been so supportive. My mum's a gem, she's always taught us to go out there and try, conquer the world, really. She doesn't despite whether you have a disability or not, she says you should be able to do your own things. And so, that's never stopped me. But I know of stories and close people who think that if someone has a disability, that, the parents are sort of ruined and they're going to have to look after the child, and the child is sort of just seen as a burden. And that's horrible, because it wasn't the child's fault. It's not like they went into a shop and said, I'm gonna be visually impaired, please. It was given, they were born with it, and it's not their fault. So there should be a lot more just conversation around disability, and so I think that was a massive reason why I didn't use my white cane, because
Sorry, Haleemah, do you think it resonated because of the lack of positive role models when it came to people with disabilities within our communities?
Well, maybe one, that could be one side of it, but I think it was just more, you don't want the looks, you don't want people looking at you when you're using.
Okay,
I'm going
to be awfully rude and apologise for this, but we're coming to our break and we need to go there. But I know you're going to stay with us. We're going to carry on this very powerful conversation. It's not often I'm left to just listen and enjoy every moment of it, and that's what I'm doing. Really powerful, inspiring stuff from Haleemah, Sadiaa. We'll take a very quick break. We'll be back very, very shortly. Don't go anywhere. See you shortly. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. My special guest is Haleemah Sadiaa. She's joining us live on British Muslim TV from Slough. We're going to open the lines as well now and take some of your calls or questions. Call us now on 01924 231 083. Now, Haleemah, you studied law. Tell us about some of the things you've been able to achieve up until now.
Do you mean my degrees?
Yes, there's quite a few, isn't there?
There are quite a few. Yeah, I seem to be collecting them. I've got 3 law degrees. One of which, so when you want to become a lawyer in the UK, you have to do a qualifying law degree, and that's your first undergraduate LLB. So mine was 4 years. It's normally 3 years, but I chose to do a sandwich course. And what that is you do 2 years at university, and then you go off in the field for 1 year. So you do a professional placement within somewhere like a law firm. Mine was in Parliament. And then you come back in your 4th year, and you sort of finish your degree off, and you do your dissertation and all your last year exams. So that was 4 years. And then I did a 1 year combined bar course and master's in law. So I got 2 degrees out of it, but it was in 1 year. So in total, that's 3 degrees.
Yeah, busy. Did you have any time to live your life?
I'm gonna sound really I'm going to sound like one of those who, you know, says, "Oh, I like what I do," but I think I've found happiness in what I'm doing right now. You know, I get to be on lovely interviews like this, and that doesn't come around every day. And so I do, you know, I do take advantage of opportunities that come out of my success. And so, yeah, I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. And how important is there for there to be diverse role models in the law profession, whether that be solicitors, barristers, judges, you know, the sort of, you know.
Yeah, it's really important for there to be diverse representatives in the legal profession, but in any profession. A friend and I have actually started a podcast called Disability is Not a Bar, where we wanted to interview legal practitioners with a disability so that they can tell us about their experience of joining the bar. And you know, it really took off. We've had practicing barristers, we've had aspiring barristers, we've even have judges who've come onto our podcast, and they've spoken about all their different various backgrounds and you know, and what disability they have. And so it's you know, it's a resource that I hope would have been available when I was doing my research. And I'm really grateful that, you know, people have sort of benefited from it now, and we're trying to, you know, I'm not saying we're doing our, well, yes, we're doing our bit to try and raise awareness to make sure that there are people out there, but that their stories are heard.
Yeah, it's trying to give them an opportunity to be able to shine and get into the starting point, which is missing, isn't it? You talked earlier on about ending up wanting to be a barrister. Just describe what's the journey from where you are now and what you need to do to become that barrister.
Of course. So I've got my legal sort of qualifications behind me. I've got my law degrees, and I've passed bar school, and I've also been called to the bar of England and Wales. So I'm officially a unregistered barrister. So I'm a barrister, but I'm unregistered, which means I can't practice right now. So I can't give anyone legal advice. But in order to become a practicing barrister, I need something called a pupillage, which is like 1 year training on the job practical experience. And I applied this year. I don't think I've made it this year, so I'm going to apply again next year, because it's a 1 year cycle kind of thing. You can only apply once a year. So yeah, I'll apply again next year. But in the meantime, I'm working as a casework officer for the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's giving me a lot of vital experience that I need to be, you know, to sort of gain my experience in the meantime. So I'm not just sitting on my hands waiting for a pupillage to fall in my lap. I'm still gaining work experience, and yeah, it's going quite well. It's going as well as it can.
So a question that I like to often ask my guests who appear on my show: what have you learned about yourself during your journey?
I love this question, because what I've learned about myself during my journey is to accept your challenges and not to hide from them, and be confident in who you are. Like, I've always been quite a confident person. I've always been good at talking, but you know, the one aspect of my journey that's been the main difficulty has been my sight loss. And I think it took me a bit too long to really address it, or, you know, face it. I don't know whether that's because I didn't have the right resources as a child, or whether it just wasn't something that I knew of. But I think, you know, I've definitely learned more about my disability in the last few years than I have in my entire life. And like I said before, I only wish that I'd known this when I was in secondary school, because it would have saved me a lot of trauma.
I'm going to switch that question now and say, what have you learned about others during your journey?
What I've learned about others during my journey is that everyone wants to help. Sometimes they might not have the right approach. For example, I I was getting on the bus, and the TFO driver, instead of asking, how he can help, he just tried to pick me up and put me on the bus, and I had to literally scream and say, all I need is your arm, So I think people's intentions are in the right place, but they sort of get flustered when they see someone who's got a disability, whether that be blindness, whether that be wheelchair. They sort of just go, oh, how do we deal with this? And that shouldn't be the approach. The approach should be, how can I help? What would you, do you need help? Are you okay? Because most often I know what I'm doing and I'll just say, no, thank you. But then on the other hand, sometimes I rely on people's help. Like if there's somewhere I haven't been, I'll know at the back of my mind that I know someone's going to come up to me and ask me if I need help. So I'll just be like, yeah.
Yeah, help me. In a real sense, when you tweeted that picture on Twitter, did you expect it to get 30,000 plus likes?
Absolutely not. This day and age, everyone's on social media, and so I was literally just posting another one of my pictures, another one of my posts. Being the millennial that I am, I'm quite active on social media. I do know that people like posts where you've sort of shown like a graduation picture and loads of people are like, oh, congratulations, etc., etc. But the reason that I posted this picture was literally because the picture just meant so much to me personally, and I didn't expect that that response, but equally I'm very, very delighted that it's reached so many people. I've had newspapers from Pakistan who have reached out, and I've done a few interviews with them. I've had
you've even did an interview in Urdu as well, haven't you?
Yeah,
I was impressed.
I did another one today, and then there was a newspaper in Bradford that sort of reached out. So I'm really happy that it's reached a lot of people. The one thing that I can hope is that it reaches that one parent who thinks that their child has a disability and they don't know what to do, or that child who's like, oh no, I don't know what to do. So if it at least helps one person, my job's done.
Yeah, well, I suppose my final question to you, what does the future hold for you?
The future holds for me to be hopefully a practicing criminal barrister very, very soon, and I can only ask for your duas and support in that. But it's definitely heading that way, inshallah. So yeah, I'm working towards it, and that's what we'll achieve.
Yeah, and this podcast seems like something which is going to grow, inshallah, from strength to strength.
Yeah, I mean, it got picked up by the Times, which was remarkable. And then we've had a few judges who've come on it, which is even amazing, so good. So yeah, the podcast has really, really, really taken off. And it's quite good because in episode 1, my co-host interviews me and I sort of talk about my journey. And then in episode 2, I interview her. And then from episode 3, we've had guests who've come on. So it's really a massive bank of information for whether that be recruiters or aspiring barristers or just individuals who have a disability to learn how someone who's either aspiring to become a barrister or has become a barrister or has even gone all the way to the judiciary is dealing living their life with their disability.
Well, you've been an absolute joy. I've really loved it, every minute of it, listening to your story, and you've really inspired me tonight. Thank you so much for being my guest.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
That was Haleemah Sadiaa. Powerful still personal testimony of her story and her journey. And we pay tribute to her for the waves that she's causing and the glass ceilings, inshallah, that she will break along the journey. And we thank her for being so open and honest and human. And really, I found it's not often I get the chance to really celebrate a guest and think absolutely every minute of it. Thank you so much to her, but thank you also to Shaykh Muhammad Umar for remembering Ambassador Robert Dixon Crane, who sadly passed away earlier on this year. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates his rank in Jannah. We are not here next week. We are back the week after. Whatever you do over the next few weeks, please take care of yourself and each other. And I'll see you very, very soon. From me and the whole team here at British Muslim TV, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.